No trip to York is complete without a visit to the Minster. So without further ado, here is our top 10 things we learned when visiting the York Minster.
This is super impressive.
So to start off, it was very large. From one length to the other, it was over 500 feet. And just the width at its widest point was over 200 feet. And then the tallest point, the Lantern's Tower, was over 230 feet high.
We're really beating ourselves up though, because apparently you can climb all the way to the top and get this amazing view of York.
If we ever make it back to York, we will definitely make sure we put that on our list of things to do. Now the rose window was really impressive to me, more so on the outside. It stood out more in the architecture, I thought, but from the inside it just kind of gets hidden. Like there's so many levels and colors going on inside the building that you don't notice it as much. Still very impressive, of course. So I guess we kind of have a thing for finding organs. Really fascinating. It's beautiful, because we don't have very many over here that I've seen.
Even though we were never there when they were playing them.
Sadly. But apparently there's over 5,000 pipes. And it's gone through a lot of restoration over the last couple centuries. And just recently started being played again, like within the last year, I believe. But the casing for it and that whole surrounding area was just covered with these wood paneling, so it's really hard to see the organ itself. Which brings us to the choir room, where the organ is. We spent a lot of time just looking around in there.
The craftsmanship on just everything in the Minster is beyond impressive.
And apparently the ceiling is over 100 foot tall, so I can just imagine when everybody's singing that sound just travels throughout the whole Minster.
Just look at the craftsmanship on the pulpit. Just one thing. There's just so much work that went into this building and still goes into this building.
I found it interesting that apparently this whole room had burnt down in the 1800s.
And that's also an interesting spelling of choir. I love the arched ceilings.
But the fact that they were able to rebuild and restore it to this former glory, I suppose, was very impressive. And this whole area did scream the whole Gothic feel with all those points. I liked how the little door was like hidden in. Which brings us to our number 6, hidden doors. I didn't even realize this was a door until I was walking by it and saw a keyhole. And then I had to like take a step back and look and see there was a door just hidden in the paneling. It's very well decorative and
It wasn't for the key. One of the staff members opened it up though while we were there and we got to peek inside.
I think it's just a maintenance closet. Just one of those things we found cool. And of course, the stained glass was amazing. I found it interesting that there are over 300 window panels that make up that entire stained glass window.
The stained glass windows are just incredibly impressive, very beautiful, and you could probably just spend days going through them all.
And apparently throughout the whole York Minster, they've been doing a refurbishing and restoration of all the stained glass, which are apparently 128 medieval windows around the whole cathedral.
This is really, really impressive.
Yeah. They're in the process of restoring it with UV protective glazing. So I guess that preserves the stained glass, which makes sense. And there's just so much detail we weren't able to see because all the windows are so high up. And so you can't really get a closer look.
Or just zoom in with the camera or take binoculars.
Yeah, take binoculars, that would work. We'll keep that in mind for next time. The gravestones were kind of an interesting surprise. I wasn't expecting it until we looked down at one point and saw them. And then the whole time we walked through the Minster, we saw more and more of them.
We've only been in modern churches and they don't bury people in them.
No.
Granted, I think they still bury people in these Minsters to this day.
But they also had memorials. Apparently this was Archbishop Richard Stern. So he's not buried there from what I understand, it's just a memorial to his life. And then we also came across the shrine tomb of Walter D. Gray, the Archbishop. He had quite this display. Should I go into the basement?
Yeah, it's the crypt.
Watch your head.
Yep.
The crypt was very interesting. It's basically the oldest part of the building.
Besides what's underneath it.
Well, yes, of course. We'll get to that next. And I was expecting a lot of graves under there, but apparently it holds mostly artifacts. It was kind of set up like a museum.
It was pretty much empty when we were filming, but once we were done filming, like 50 or 60 school kids came down.
And it got very loud in there.
A lot of echoing.
Yes. And, of course, the tomb of St. William was buried there.
Very intricate pillar.
A lot of stone masonry. It was a big change from up top because of how short the ceilings were. But it had a lot of interesting architecture under there as well. I think I found this the coolest in the crypt. I love mosaics. And this one was very well done and so much detail.
I think that's with everything in the Minster.
There was so much detail. But it had such tiny pieces that were different colors that just made up this whole picture. There was so much detail even in the face. So we didn't realize that there were Roman ruins underneath the Minster until we came across this section inside.
Apparently even the people of York didn't know there were ruins under it until they had to shore it up.
But now they have a whole museum displaying everything.
It was a very nice surprise though, because going in we did not know about the Roman ruins.
No.
Yep, they actually have showed video of the work being done to shore up the foundation.
Yes, so apparently that center tower was sagging and it was in crisis because everything was cracking and buckling, so they had to find a way to shore it up. And in the process of digging is when they uncovered all the ruins and artifacts from Roman times.
Which they preserved extremely well considering they still had to shore it up as well.
Yes, and pour loads of concrete.
Working around the Roman ruins I'm sure was not easy, and I think they tried to preserve as much as they could.
It had a lot of history that it showed. The fact that they were able to uncover so much was really impressive.
They even had like displays and diagrams of what the Roman fort that once stood there would have potentially looked like.
And where it was positioned underneath the Minster.
It was actually a lot bigger than the Minster, so it may have been a whole Roman city, if I remember.
It still blows my mind how old all this stuff is.
And that was some of the Roman artifacts that they found while they were fixing the pillars.
Speaking of pillars, there's some old Roman pillars. I don't know why, but I found the coins probably the most interesting. Maybe it's just because it's money. But it was very different, and yet still reminded me of modern times. Now this wasn't really part of the Roman ruins or anything, but it was in that same area, and I had to include it because a 1,000-year-old Bible is just super impressive to me. And for our top number one thing that we found interesting at the York Minster.
The carvings.
The York Minster had so many different statues and carvings throughout the whole thing, including on the inside. All of them, big and small, had so much detail to show. But we loved every minute of it. This was one of my favorite ones we found on the inside.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
He's like holding it in his hand.
That's kind of cool.
He was holding a miniature Minster in his hand. You actually pointed out the faces to me in the ceiling. I had to zoom in to see it.
I guess there's a pretty good chance that's actually made of real gold.
I don't know. It's that fancy.
Maybe not solid,
This
but they're
isn't
probably
the
gold-plated.
Vatican.
Apparently the whole outside structure is made of magnesium limestone, which would explain its coloring. But the outside carvings were probably the most impressive.
So yeah, our good friend Jay the day before had taken me around and kind of explained to me how they do this. Apparently there's always scaffolding around the Minster because they are always working on it year round, and they replicate every stone on the Minster that needs to be replaced, including the statues, the gargoyles, everything. And they have this outside area that they work. I really wanted to try to get his attention and talk with him, but he was working, so I didn't. I do kind of regret it because I feel like it would have been an awesome conversation.
But they only hire the best of the best to do all this stone work.
So it costs hundreds of thousands of pounds per year to do all this maintenance. But I know when I asked Jay if he thought it was worth it, he said absolutely not, only to preserve the history. And I would agree with him after seeing it. It is definitely worth keeping this well preserved for many more centuries to come. It was a surprise though, and it was really cool to see that they do it right there on the site.
Well, that about wraps up our top 10 things we learned at the York Minster. So please remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more of our adventures.